There's an absolute wealth of knowledge and information in this book, and one of the really important things is it gives us what we think is an original dressing for a very popular Derbyshire fly called the double badger. I've got a confession to make. Sometimes when I've got a tourist in and I sell them a double badger, I tell them it was originally tied by a medieval Derbyshire angler using a thread from the hem of a nun's nightie. These double badgers are a good fast water dry fly for trout and grayling. They're normally tied size 14, size 16, perhaps even a bit smaller than that. This hook is enormous. This hook is a size 8 hook. Normally we tie it on a fly hook a lot smaller. That's about a 14, that's about a size 17, that particular one. But we'll tie it on here so we can see it. A lot of waters are catch and release, and a lot of waters are barbless hooks only. The River Wye here on the Peacock Hotel water is catch and release barbless hooks, so in any case I'd urge you to flatten that barb down. Just tighten that up a bit. Try and make sure there. Although when you are tying to begin with, you might try leaving that barb in position, because we often use that barb as a reference point as where to start and finish our silks. I'm going to use purple tying silk, but it's perfectly okay to use black, olive or brown. They all work. Most people nowadays use black. So I'm just going to start this bit of purple silk. I'll start it midships and I'll take it down there and just run it all the way down towards there. It's starting to tighten up a bit now, so I'll counter spin it a few times and just take it down. Try and make a nice even bed. A thing I do here that's slightly different, your thread should actually end on the last bit of the straight bit, but I do something slightly different with this pattern. What I like to do, I like to take 2 or 3 dense tight little wraps round just on that little bend there, and then back again. There's a reason for that, and back onto the straight bit. And the rear hackle on this is going to be a hackle called a badger hackle. The hackles you can use, well, it's up to you. You can use a real nice quality saddle cape. You'll get a lot of flies out of that one particular strand and they'll all be uniform looking. You can use a genetic cape as such. This one's getting a bit old now. You can see what sort of flies size range I've been tying flies out of. Or you can use what used to be known as an Indian or maybe a Chinese imported cape. I don't think there were many genetically bred hackles around in 1940, so I'll use one of these. And I'm just going to try and get one which that will just about be just a bit longer than the gape of the hook. Maybe 1 1/4 turns. I'll just pluck a few of those fibres away from both ends. I'm going to kind of try and wind it forward, so I'll just take a few more strands off there than off the top. That means when it starts to wind, the first thing that touches is a bit of bare stem and not a bit of fibre, which might get punched out of place. If I just catch that in there and take the thread away from me and lift it up like a little crane and then just ease it back into position, that usually holds it for me. And we've left just a tiny bit. We've stripped a few more fibres off the bottom there. That's the bit that's going to hit the shaft of the hook first, so I've just left that clear to allow for that. I don't know if you can see that or not. Nice and easy, with nice even little bed of silk there. we're going to wind this hackle, and it doesn't want to go much further than the point of where the hook is. It's always awkward winding hackles because we've got to dodge it round this point and that silk. That silk gets in the way. If we just take a few open turns forward, it kind of moves it out of the way, gives us a bit of elbow room. Try and make this as a really old cape. This probably dates from 1940s, so it's a bit manky there. And don't put too much pressure on, just round. Try and persuade that to go vertically, and touching turns, just fill in that gap. Just kind of yay far, just in front of the point of the hook. Now, with a bit of luck, if we can back wind that now, and if we just change hand positions for the hackle pliers and the thread, and just go like that and slide it down. That's got it in one. Change hands again, one in front, change hands again, keeping tension on, and then over there, that kind of fastens it down reasonably nicely. And if we can just trim that off like that. Don't worry about any stray little fibres too much, it's a fairly rough looking beast, fortunately for me. So that's our rear hackle fitted. Wind your silk forward. We've sort of more or less regained the halfway position. And be careful here, because on a fly like this, it's all too easy to run out of space at the front end. Have a look how much space that hackle there occupies. Our front hackle might occupy a little bit more than that. So we need to allow at least that sort of space, plus a little bit for the head of the hook. So about there. Oops. About there, so that space would be it, but we need to come back from that a little bit and allow a bit more space than you would think for the head of a hook. There, about there. So it seems at first like that's too big a gap to put that in, but these flies have got a way of creeping forward anyway. It's something to do with the thickness of the hackle. Now then, where's my little... I'll just strip some of these fibres off. Again, we'll just go like that. Up, little crane, string it in and drop it and slide it down. Now, I like to wind the stalk forward, trim off, and then go back again, trying to make that as evenly as we can. That's going to get in the way. Lift it up and just gently push it forward and take a tight turn right at the back of it. It just gives us a little bit more space to play with. Quite a complicated little fly this, isn't it? We need some peacock herl. Well, normally we'd go for the sort of strands of peacock herl, but there's not a hell of a lot left on here. As I'm tying a bigger fly, I usually go for a fair old bunch. This is the sort of stuff you might consider stripping off for cool bodies on flies. But if you just get yourself a nice bunch, slide it off. This stuff, that thin end's going to break on you if you tie it in, so cut them off before they've got chance. Give them a foot of a fluff up, and if you get a gentle twist, they reinforce each other. And I like to just catch it in with my tying thread about halfway, gently catch it in, one turn, and then you can just draw through and then nail it down going backwards rather. Right up to where that front hackle's tied off, that rear hackle's tied off, and then forward again. We're trying to make that as even as we can. Now here's a tip which I was taught by a chap called Philip White, great fly tyer, little ray of sunshine. He told us years ago that if you take a tight turn just in front of that hackle and then just move that forward, it gives us an aiming point for our bunch of peacock fibres. Because very often not knowing where to tie it off and you end up with big gaps in everything. There's lots of different ways of reinforcing peacock herl. It's worth a little book in itself, but good old-fashioned dauber varnish, allowed to go slightly tacky, kind of works. All I'm going to do now, you just give it a gentle twist and wrap it right round at the back there. Gentle twist right round at the back and advance it gently twisted. And this is a rotary vise, and if you've got a rotary vise it's a big help at this time of year, but don't worry about it. There, making a nice sort of body for us, isn't it? Oops. Recountering stuff sometimes. There we go. Right up to the back of that front hackle, yeah? Right up to the back of it. Now, be careful, put your finger on it. If we back wind that thread and catch hold of our peacock herl and then come up and just catch it in, we've caught it with its very first wrap of thread and it's not left us a gap. Lay it down evenly. You'll trim it off. Now we've got a couple of layers of thread, we've got a bunch of fibre ends, we've got all sorts of stuff going there. If you take a few wraps forward, maybe counter spin your thread to flatten it off and give us a nice even bed of silk which we hope to wind our hackle on forward and back. There we go. There's only going to be room for a couple of 3 or 4 wraps of thread there. Again, you can use a similar trick. Give yourself a bit more space. Just go forward and just gives yourself that little bit of space with open turns. If this breaks, you'll hear a naughty word. Maybe 2. Down. There. Few turns there. It's getting a bit fragile now, so that's probably enough. If we back wind that with a bit of luck, if we can just catch that cross over top of it, come round underneath, then cross over underneath, that's usually sufficient. Couple of turns there, 3 if you're nervous. Snip that off. Now there's a few strays there, but I'm not take it back. You can't quite see these. White on a white background's not great. There we go. Now, as a safety catch, if you're not too happy with doing a whip finish, why not just use a little half hitch tool and just put a little half hitch on as a safety catch before you start doing your whip finish. If you're nervous about a whip finish generally, you make quite a secure fastening. I've done a whip finish there. How about doing two? So it's got one half hitch, two half hitches. Hey, let's be three half hitches. That's quite secure, isn't it? Just being lazy. Ought to be a whip finish really. There we go. Push that off. There's always a few stray fibres knocking about here. It's a fairly rough looking beast anyway, is the double badger. But before you think, oh my god, there's a stray fibre, sometimes if you just get the back of your scissors, you can just sort of preen them into position if you want them to look a bit sharper. God knows what they take this particular fly for. It seems to work well in early spring, high summer, and again at the back end. I sort of associate it when stoneflies are on water. Maybe they take it as, I don't know, consenting adults or something. Just a little bit of extra. I put a tiny bit of varnish on there. Right at the beginning of it, big fly this, right at the beginning of it I did a few little extra wraps of tying silk right on the butt end, and the reason for that is that when these flies fail, when they get ragged apart by trout's teeth, that back hackle can kind of come undone. But if you put a little tiny drop of varnish on back, it just makes it a bit more durable fly. That's a double badger. We've tied it big deliberately so you can see it. That's the sort of size that you might tie it and fish it on normally. 14 or a 16 will be fine. I think that one writes a 17. It's about as small as I tie them. A good fast water dry fly, not just in Derbyshire but most places you fish. Tight lines.